about types of economies of scale, and this is a continuity of my tutorial video about the first part, which is the economies of scale. I promise to discuss a continuation for the types of economies of scale because of the delimitation of that previous tutorial video. Our learning outcomes for today, students will be able to understand the difference between internal economies of scale and external economies of scale. Numbers two, students will be able to identify the different types of economies of scale or internal economies of scale, and I will present some concrete examples on that. Alright, let us start. As mentioned to you before, economies of scale, the principle of these economies of scale is that as manufacturers increase their outputs or the volume of production, their cost, the unit cost, is totally reduced. That is the principle of economies of scale. Now, there are two types, the internal economies and the external. When we say internal economies, these are controllable by the marketer or by management because they are internal to the company, intrinsic to the company. So, and there are five types of internal economies. While external, of course, opposite, it depends on factors like extrinsic factors like industry, the geographic location, and government. And we will explain this in layman's terms. So let us cite some differences. When we say again internal, this is intrinsic to the company and it is controllable. Like for example, the growth of the firm itself. No? Number two, the lower long run average cost, because as you increase your production in a given period of time, your average cost tends to lower down and to the peak that you have a long run average cost. And of course, we know for a fact that efficiencies from larger scale of production, because that is the principle of the economies of scale. You increase your production volume, your average cost tends to lower down. Okay? And range of economies, example is technical and financial. We will go to that later for the types of internal economies of scale. External economies of scale are extrinsic factors like expansion of the industry in a certain location, the benefits of that firm to the community, okay? And the cluster of the same industry in that particular city, so it becomes to develop, okay, and helps to explain the rapid growth of many cities. Let us proceed. Internal economies of scales. We know that for a fact that as this is intrinsic to the company when we say internal economies of scale. For example, large companies can purchase bulk of raw materials. So what's the impact? It lowers the cost per unit of the materials they need to make their products. So what's the outcome? They can use the savings to increase profits, or the option of passing the savings to consumers and compete on price, as competitive advantage, no, of cost leadership. And then you can see here on the graph that the average cost tends to lower down, no? Tends to lower down as your output increases per particular quarter. So your average cost tends to lower down. This is the long run average cost, no? You see that in Q3. Now let us define what is an average cost. Average cost is a method of inventory valuation. Okay? A cost to inventory items based on total cost of goods purchased or produced in a period divided by the total number of items purchased or produced. That's why it's called also weighted average. The average cost method is also known as weighted average cost. Example, assume the company sold 72 units in first quarter. Okay? The weighted average cost is the total inventory purchase in the quarter. Let's say we have 113,300, 113,300 divided by the total inventory count from the quarter. Let's say we have 100 for an average of 1,333 per unit. The cost of goods sold will be recorded as 72 units sold times 1,133 average cost. That gives you 81,576. The cost of goods available for sale or inventory at the end of the period will be 28 because 72 units were sold and the outstanding is 28. So you will multiply 28 by the average cost of 1,133 gives you 31,724 for that outstanding 28 units. Let us proceed. Let us now discuss the 5 types of internal economies of scale. The first one is technical economies of scale. So this is a result of efficiencies, meaning to say you create more outputs, less inputs. So that is efficiency or productivity, output over input. All right. So this technical economies of scale is intrinsic to the firm or company. Okay? Larger companies can take advantage of more efficient equipment because of the intervention of technology. They have, example, fully automatic machineries. Example of technical in a shipping firm. So these large shipping companies can cut costs, save costs by using super tankers. Or large companies achieve technical economies of scale because they are doing it and they gain experience in the use of that technology. They're far ahead of their smaller competition because of the intrinsic technical economies of scale they have. The second one is the monopsony. What is this? Monopsony is when a company buys so much of a product that it can reduce its per unit cost. Let's take, for example, this consumer company or Walmart, no? For that matter. Walmart uh, have a positioning of everyday low prices. Why? Because they buy huge amount of product, which in turn can reduce its per unit cost. That is monopsony power. Like for example, Walmart, who else? This, you know, uh, Walmart, what else? The competition of Walmart, no? For that matter. Number three is the managerial. Again, it is intrinsic to the company. That's why it's called internal economies of scale. These occur when large firms can afford to hire consultants or specialists for a particular project. For example, there is a seasoned sales executive that has the talent, knowledge, ability to acquire purchase order or huge purchase order, but they claim, of course, high salary or wages. But in the long run, they can be compensated because of that huge order. Okay, so let's proceed. Uh, the next type will be the financial economies of scale. This one is again intrinsic to the company because company can acquire cheaper access to capital. Example, larger company can source capital from the stock market with an initial public offering. Uh, as well as big firms have higher credit rating. As a result, they benefit from the lower interest rates, no, that these lending institutions extends. Example is their bonds. And the last is the network economies of scale, and this is specifically for online businesses. Example is eBay, Amazon's, Lazada, because it's costs almost nothing to support each additional consumer or customer with their existing network infrastructure. So revenues from new customer is all profit for the business, and that is again intrinsic to the company. And the last type of economies of scale is external. This is extrinsic to the company. Like for example, what are these external factors? Example is external economies of scale is the size. It creates preferential treatment that most often occurs in government. Example of these external companies. For example, in a certain local geographic area, there is Schumart or SM was established in that particular area, and therefore Robinson is going to follow. So therefore, that geographic location, it will progress and develop, right? The sale of real property will also be appraised, no? It will increase definitely. It will appreciate, okay? Like for example, if you are there are in Philippine Economic Zone Authority, there is locations wherein they are giving uh, opportunities and incentives to locators or investors, foreign investors, to have their transaction free of tax because they are located in Philippine Economic Zone Authority. Those are examples of external economies of scale. It, because of the intervention of government, okay, there is an increased of, because there are no taxes, they can have a competitive advantage. Example also with the real estate developers, they can persuade local government units to build roads and infrastructure to support their presence in that locality. This government building saves the entrepreneur, the real estate developers from paying those costs. Large companies can also take advantage of joint research with universities. So, meaning to say, if this, for example, there is SM, there is Robinson, there are also small businesses that will come in into that cities of different industries. So there is already a what you call a cluster or ancillary services in that particular city, which makes that geographic location and those businesses, especially large corporations, to have an external economies of scale. So our references for this one is Balance and Alicia Tuovilla from Average Cost Method and Economies of Scale. So that ends up our tutorial video for this internal economies of scale, which is intrinsic to the company, while external is extrinsic for the company. So thank you very much for listening to my tutorial video. Thank you for those who subscribes, share, and like the video. I'll see you next time in my next tutorial video. Always keep safe and thank you very much.